It may seem a trifle risky to perform the Eroica with a chamber orchestra. Perhaps it is, but that's how it was first done. In Beethoven's day, there weren't any vast concert halls. His orchestral works were usually done in large rooms where there wasn't the space for big string sections. The strings of an orchestra were increased only later in the 19th century, and the growing size of concert halls meant that classical orchestral music began to be played out of its natural environment. This meant that conductors had to multiply Beethoven's wind parts to balance the thick and massive string sound of the modern orchestra. Wagner, Mahler and Weingartner in particular made various suggestions, a lot of which are still in general use. But if you cut down the strings, there's no need to double the wind. In our performance, we used 6 first and 6 second violins, 4 violas, 4 cellos and 2 double basses. Ideally, we'd have been better off with something like 8-8-7-6-4, but circumstances didn't permit that. We've left Beethoven's wind parts exactly as he wrote them. Occasionally, it's a bit pedantic to do this, especially where he might gladly have availed himself of an extra top or bottom note that wasn't on the instrument of his day. But we thought it would be interesting to hear the result of complete faithfulness in this respect. On the other hand, there are passages where it's vital to stick to Beethoven's instrumentation. There's a good example in the first movement. You'll remember the fearsome dissonant passage that erupts in the middle of the development. Now there's a gap in the brass parts, 6 bars to be exact, and Weingartner suggested that the reason for this was that the valveless instruments of the time couldn't play the required notes. So accordingly, he filled them in. Now I can't agree with this. In the first place, I think those harmonies sound unnatural on the brass in that context. Secondly, I'm certain that Beethoven took advantage of this limitation by making a tremendous re-entry of brass and drums a few bars later. Let's compare. First, here's the passage with the brass added, where Beethoven left it out. And it's what you normally hear in the concert hall nowadays. Only the entry of the timpani makes any difference to the sound, and that's usually damped down. Now here's the same passage as we did it in Birmingham. Notice that when the brass is absent, the violins are playing a lot of E's and A's. I believe Beethoven wanted the harsh, open strings here, and that's what we've done. The re-entry of the brass is very striking after their 6-bar rest. Near the end of the first movement, the trumpets are almost always asked by the conductor to play the whole theme, despite Beethoven's score. This, I think, anticipates the real climax. In the original score, the theme is thrillingly swallowed up by a rising tumult and taken for granted. At the climax of the Andante section of the finale, most conductors ask all 3 horns to play the big theme, as against Beethoven's 1. The effect is somewhat Straussian, and you can't hear that the cellos and basses also have the melody. Our tempo for this section, incidentally, may seem on the quick side. This is because I think it's not the continuation of the funeral march some people seem to imagine. By this time, the music has reached a pitch of elation that enables it to relax into a broader stride. One more point. We make the repeat in the first movement. Beethoven took it out and put it back again, and it's provable that without it the whole movement is thrown out of gear rhythmically by 2 bars. Now let's hear the symphony.